When 17-year-old Skylar Whitmore walked into Ridgemont High's chemistry lab at 7:30 a.m., with her signature platinum ponytail chopped raggedly at shoulder length, the entire advanced placement class fell silent, because everyone knew that Tyler Brennan and his crew had finally crossed a line that would unleash something far more explosive than any chemical reaction they'd ever studied. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Ridgemont High School, one of those pristine suburban institutions where the parking lot gleamed with $60,000 SUVs and the trophy cases stretched endlessly down marble hallways. Skylar had arrived early. As always, her platinum blonde hair swept into that perfect high ponytail that had become her trademark, the one her late grandmother had taught her to braid when she was 6. The one she'd worn every single day since she'd headed straight for her locker on the 3rd floor. The one plastered with her National Honor Society certificate and debate team photos. The hallway was nearly empty, just the faint echo of the janitor's cart somewhere down by the east wing. That should have been her first warning. Well, if it isn't Princess Perfect, Tyler Brennan materialized from behind the trophy case like a bad omen, flanked by his usual crew Marcus Chen, who despite his 4.0 GPA seemed to find validation only in Tyler's shadow, and Jake Morrison, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in town. They formed a semicircle around her locker, that practiced formation they'd perfected over years of making life hell for anyone who dared excel without their permission. "Tyler," Skylar said evenly, not looking up from her combination lock. "It's 7:15 a.m. Don't you have a failed algebra test to make up?" Marcus snickered, but Tyler's jaw tightened. That was the thing about Skylar, she never cowered. Never gave them the fear they fed on. It had been driving Tyler crazy since she'd transferred here sophomore year and immediately claimed the valedictorian spot he'd assumed was his birthright. "Funny," Tyler said, stepping closer. The smell of his excessive cologne invaded her space-some $200 bottle his mother probably bought him. "You know what else is funny? How you think you're so much better than everyone else?" "I don't think I'm better than everyone," Skylar replied, finally meeting his eyes. "Just better than you, but then again, that's not exactly a high bar." Jake laughed, despite himself, then caught Tyler's glare and quickly coughed to cover it. "You've got a mouth on you." "Whitmore," Tyler said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register she'd heard him use before cornering freshmen in the bathroom. "Someone should teach you when to keep it shut." "Is that a threat?" Skylar asked, pulling her physics textbook from her locker, because I'm pretty sure Principal Harrison would love to hear about how the mayor's son is threatening female students. Again, Tyler's face flushed. Last semester, he'd been suspended for 3 days after shoving Emma Rodriguez into a locker for refusing to give him her calculus homework. The only reason it hadn't been expulsion was his mother's generous donation to the new athletic complex. "You really think you're untouchable, don't you?" Marcus chimed in, trying to earn his daily validation from Tyler. "Just because you get straight A's and kiss every teacher's. I earn my grades." Skylar cut him off. Unlike some people who pay Nathan Phillips $300 to write their AP history essays, Marcus's face went white. That information wasn't public knowledge, or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. Tyler grabbed her physics textbook and hurled it down the hallway. It skidded across the polished floor, pages fluttering like broken wings. "Oops," he said, not even trying to hide his smirk. "Looks like you dropped something." Skylar took a deep breath, calculating. She could report this again and watch nothing happen again. Or she could pick up her book, go to class, and continue documenting everything in the file she'd been building since junior year started. The file that now contained screenshots of 23 different girls describing harassment from Tyler and his crew, photos of vandalized lockers, and even a few audio recordings from her phone. She chose option 2, walking calmly down the hallway to retrieve her book. But as she bent down, she felt that sudden lightness at the back of her head, followed by the soft whisper of hair hitting the floor. Time seemed to stop. Skylar's hand flew to the back of her head, where her ponytail should have been. Instead, her fingers found jagged ends just below her shoulders. On the floor beside her physics book lay her severed ponytail, still held together by her grandmother's vintage pearl hair tie. She turned slowly, mechanically, to see Jake holding a pair of scissors, the heavy-duty kind from the art room. His face had gone pale, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done. Tyler was grinning, that same satisfied smirk he wore after every conquest. Every degradation. Now you look more like the trashy scholarship kid you really are, Tyler said. Maybe next time you'll remember your place. Something inside Skylar crystallized in that moment. Not broke crystallized. Like carbon under pressure becoming diamond. She picked up her severed ponytail with the same care she'd used to handle her grandmother's china, tucked it into her backpack, and stood up. You're right, Tyler, she said, her voice eerily calm. I do need to remember my place, and you need to learn yours. The warning bell rang, and suddenly the hallway flooded with students. The gasps started immediately as people noticed Skylar's butchered hair, the scissors still glinting in Jake's guilty hand. The platinum strands scattered on the floor like evidence at a crime scene. Oh my God. Skylar, Melody Chang rushed over, her student council president badge catching the fluorescent lights. What happened? Ask them, Skylar said simply, then walked away, leaving Tyler to spin whatever story he thought would save him this time. But Skylar wasn't heading to the principal's office. She wasn't even heading to the bathroom to cry. As Tyler probably expected, she was heading to the chemistry lab, where she had first period AP Chem with Mr. Rodriguez and, more importantly, where she had access to the school's electronic gradebook system during her teacher's aid period. The thing about Ridgemont High was that it ran on two currencies, actual money and perceived perfection. The parents pumped in millions to maintain the illusion that their children were flawless future leaders, and the administration was more than happy to play along. But what would happen if that illusion shattered? What if every parent suddenly received detailed documentation of what their perfect children were really doing? Skylar sat through chemistry class, her butchered hair drawing stares and whispers. Becca Williams, who'd been Tyler's girlfriend until he'd cheated on her with 3 different juniors, kept shooting her sympathetic looks. Even Mr. Rodriguez seemed distracted, fumbling with the periodic table and mixing up atomic numbers. Miss Whitmore, he said quietly as students filed out after class, do you need to speak with someone about what happened? No? Skylar said, organizing her notes with mechanical precision, but Tyler Brennan might want to speak with someone about his college applications. You know, while he still has them. Mr. Rodriguez frowned, confused, but Skylar was already gone. Second period was her teacher's aid slot for Miss Patterson in the computer lab. Miss Patterson, who was currently on maternity leave, with a substitute who barely knew how to turn on the computers, let alone monitor what students were doing on them. Skylar sat down at the teacher's station, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't hacking, she didn't need to. As a teacher's aide, she had legitimate access to certain systems, and as someone who'd been documenting Tyler's reign of terror for over a year, she had everything she needed. First, she pulled up the shared drive where students submitted their college essays. Tyler's Yale application was there, along with his Harvard and Princeton ones. She opened them, not to read but to run them through a plagiarism checker. Advanced one the school paid for but rarely used. The results were exactly what she'd expected. 78% match to an essay written by Dylan Chen, Marcus's older brother, 3 years ago. Next, she accessed the attendance system. Jake Morrison's perfect attendance record was a lie. Had photos of him at 3 different parties during school hours, posted on Instagram with location tags. The same Instagram where he'd posted videos of himself forcing freshmen to eat dog food during initiation week. Videos he thought he'd deleted but which Skylar had screen recorded months ago. But the real treasure was in her personal cloud storage, where she'd compiled everything. Screenshots of Tyler's Venmo transactions paying for completed homework, recorded conversations of him threatening girls who wouldn't date him, photos of the racist graffiti he'd spray painted on Deshaun Washington's car and then blamed on outsiders. She packaged it all into neat, professional folders. One for Yale admissions, one for Harvard, one for Princeton, one for the school board, one for the local news station that was always hungry for scandal in the suburbs, and one special folder just for Mayor Brennan, who was up for re-election next month on a family values platform. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard what happened. Check the 3rd floor bathroom. A friend. Skylar frowned but saved her work and headed upstairs. The bathroom was empty except for a small package on the Cinca professional grade wig in exactly her shade of platinum blonde. styled in a perfect ponytail. The attached note read, "From all the girls who wish they'd been as brave as you, give them hell. The sisterhood." She looked in the mirror, at her choppy, ruined hair, and then at the wig, but instead of putting it on, she set it aside and pulled out her phone. She'd scheduled the emails to send at exactly 11:45 am, right in the middle of lunch when everyone would be checking their phones. Back in the cafeteria, she could feel the energy shifting. Tyler was holding court at his usual table, recreating the morning's events with dramatic flair. You should have seen her face when Jake cut it off. Like someone killed her puppy or something. Bet she's crying in the bathroom, right? He stopped mid-sentence as Skylar walked in. Her butchered hair fully visible, her head held high. She walked straight to the lunch line, ignoring the whispers that followed her like a wake. "Skylar," Aisha Patel waved her over to a table full of debate team members. "We saved you a seat." As Skylar sat down, she noticed more students gravitating toward their table. Emma Rodriguez, still bearing faint bruises from Tyler's shove. Lily Kim, who'd quit cheerleading after Tyler spread rumors about her. Deshaun Washington, whose car had cost $2,000 to repaint. One by one, they filled the surrounding tables, creating a silent wall of solidarity. "Nice hair," Emma said with a small smile. "Very Joan of Arc." "If Joan of Arc had access to Gmail," Skylar replied, checking her phone. 11:43 a.m. Tyler's voice carried across the cafeteria. "What are you all looking at? She's just some nobody who can't take a joke. My dad donates more to this school than her entire family makes in." The first phone chimed at exactly 11:45 a.m. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the cafeteria sounded like a slot machine jackpot as hundreds of phones lit up with notifications. Skylar watched Tyler's face as he pulled out his phone, his smirk fading as he read. She could pinpoint the exact moment he saw the email subject line, Tyler Brennan's Yale application, urgent concerns regarding plagiarism and character. Marcus's phone rang his mother. Jake was frantically scrolling through Instagram, watching his carefully curated image implode in real time as the sisterhood reposted every deleted video with tags to every college he'd applied to. "What did you do?" Tyler snarled. Standing so fast, his chair clattered backward. He stormed across the cafeteria, but before he could reach Skylar's table, a wall of bodies stood up. Not just her table 3 surrounding tables, all filled with his victims from over the years. "The same thing you did," Skylar said calmly, taking a bite of her apple. "I showed everyone who you really are." Tyler's phone rang. Then again. Then again. His father, Yale admissions. The mayor's campaign manager, he rejected them all. His face cycling through rage, panic, and something that looked almost like fear. "You stupid bitch," he hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My future? Your future." Skylar stood up, and the entire cafeteria fell silent. What about Emma's future when you gave her a concussion? What about Lily's future when you destroyed her reputation? What about every girl in this school who has to choose between their safety and their education because you and your friends think harassment is a birthright? She reached into her backpack and pulled out her severed ponytail, still bound with her grandmother's pearl tie. "This?" She held it up for everyone to see. "This is assault, battery. Technically, since you made physical contact, that's up to a year in jail and a $10,000 fine in this state. But more importantly, it's evidence. Just like everything else I've collected." The cafeteria doors burst open. Principal Harrison rushed in, followed by the school resource officer, and Skylar smiled grimly. Mayor Brennan herself, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. "Tyler James Brennan," the resource officer said, his hand resting on his handcuffs. "I need you to come with me. You too. Mr. Morrison and Mr. Chen." "This is ridiculous," Tyler shouted, backing away. "It was just a prank. Tell them." "Mom." Mayor Brennan's face was stone. "Tyler, be quiet. Not another word until our lawyer arrives." As the officer led them out, Tyler twisted around to glare at Skylar. "This isn't over. You think you've won? My family owns this town. We'll bury you." "No," Skylar said quietly, but her voice carried in the silent cafeteria. "You'll bury yourself. I just handed out the shovels." The cafeteria erupted as soon as the doors closed behind them. Students hugged, cried, and shared stories they'd kept silent for too long. Teachers who'd been complicit in their silence suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. And at the center of it all, Skylar sat calmly finishing her lunch. Her butchered hair, a battle scar she wore with pride. But she wasn't done. Not even close. Her phone buzzed with a message from a blocked number. Impressive show. Whitmore. But Tyler was right about one thing. His family does own this town. You've won a battle. Not the war. Better watch your back. T.B. Sir. Skylar screenshotted the threat and added it to her ever-growing file. If Tyler's father thought intimidation would work where his son had failed, he was about to learn the same lesson. Never underestimate a girl with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As the lunch period ended and students filtered back to class, Melody Chang approached hesitantly. Skylar, the sisterhood wanted me to tell you we've got your back. All 53 of us. 53? Skylar's eyes widened. She'd known about maybe a dozen victims, and counting. Melody said grimly, your email gave a lot of girls courage to come forward. We're meeting after school in room 203. If you want to join us. Skylar nodded, then headed to her next class AP Government, where they were studying whistleblower protections. How appropriate, but as she walked through the hallways, she noticed something had changed. Girls who'd previously walked with their heads down now moved with purpose. Boys who'd laughed along with Tyler's jokes suddenly found the floor very interesting. The power dynamic of Ridgemont High had shifted in the space of a single lunch period. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number with a New York area code. She stepped into an empty classroom to answer. Miss Whitmore, this is Patricia Chen from the New York Times Education Desk. We received some very interesting documentation about systemic harassment at Ridgemont High. Would you be available for an interview? Skylar smiled for the first time all day. I'll have to check with my lawyer first. But yes, I think that can be arranged. She ended the call and looked at her reflection in the classroom window. Her hair was a disaster. She'd probably made enemies of the most powerful families in town. And her senior year had just become exponentially more complicated. But as she tucked a jagged strand behind her ear, she thought of her grandmother, a woman who'd marched for civil rights in the 60s. Who'd taught her that sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone until others found the courage to stand with you. This is just the beginning, she whispered to her reflection. The intercom crackled to life. Skylar Whitmore. Please report to the principal's office immediately. She grabbed her backpack, straightened her shoulders, and headed for what would undoubtedly be the first of many battles. But she wasn't the same girl who'd walked into school that morning with a perfect ponytail and a naive belief that documentation alone would be enough. No. The girl walking to the principal's office now understood that real change required more than evidence. It required the courage to use it, the wisdom to protect herself, and the strength to keep fighting when the powerful pushed back. And they would push back. The Brennans of the world always did. But Skylar Whitmore was ready for war. The walk to Principal Harrison's office felt like approaching a final boss battle in a video game where the developers had forgotten to include any health potions. Skylar could feel eyes on her from every classroom she passed, some sympathetic, others calculating, all wondering if the girl with the hacked-off hair had just signed her own expulsion notice. The administrative wing reeked of leather and old money, from the mahogany panels donated by the Morrison family to the oil paintings of distinguished alumni who'd gone on to become senators, CEOs, and in one unfortunate case, a convicted insider trader. Mrs. Jeffries, the principal's secretary who'd been guarding this office since the Reagan administration, looked up from her desk with an expression that could have curdled milk. He's waiting for you, she said, her tone suggesting Skylar might want to start planning her transfer paperwork now. But when Skylar opened the heavy oak door, she found not just Principal Harrison behind his imposing desk, but an entire war council. Mayor Brennan sat in the power position, her campaign manager flanking one side, a man in an expensive suit who screamed lawyer on the other. The school's attorney, Miss Hartwell, perched nervously on a side chair, while Superintendent Davies commanded the corner like a general surveying a battlefield. Miss Whitmore, Principal Harrison began, his voice strained. The man looked like he'd aged 5 years since lunch. Please, have a seat. I'll stand, Skylar said, noting how Mayor Brennan's jaw tightened at the small defiance. Very well. Harrison shuffled papers unnecessarily. We need to discuss the situation you've created today. The situation I've created? Skylar kept her voice level. I believe your star student created the situation when he assaulted me with scissors. I simply documented it, along with 2 years of similar incidents you've systematically ignored. Now, see here, the expensive suit began, but Mayor Brennan silenced him with a gesture. Let's cut through the pleasantries, the mayor said, her political smile as sharp as the scissors that had taken Skylar's ponytail. You've caused significant damage to several students' futures with your little stunt. Colleges have already called. Scholarships are being reconsidered. You've potentially ruined lives over what amounts to teenage pranks. Pranks? Skylar pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo. Was it a prank when Tyler gave Emma Rodriguez a concussion? When Jake forced a freshman to eat dog food? When your son spray-painted racial slurs on a student's car? Alleged incidents, the lawyer interjected, none of which were formally proven, because you buried them. Skylar shot back. Every complaint, every report, disappeared into this office and never came out. Well, now they're coming out through different channels. Superintendent Davies leaned forward. Miss Whitmore, what exactly do you want? Justice, Skylar said simply. Real consequences for actions. A school where girls can walk the hallways without being harassed. An administration that protects victims instead of perpetrators with trust funds. And if we were to address these concerns, Mayor Brennan said carefully, would you be willing to retract your communications to the colleges and media? Skylar almost laughed. You mean, would I help you cover this up in exchange for some vague promises? No? Then you leave us no choice. Harrison said heavily, I'm afraid I'll have to suspend you pending an investigation into your unauthorized access to school computer systems. Unauthorized? Skylar smiled. I'm a teacher's aide with legitimate access. Everything I did was within my approved permissions. Miss Hartwell, would you like to explain to them the legal difference between authorized access and hacking, or should I have my lawyer do it when she arrives? As if on cue, the door opened, but instead of a lawyer, Melody Chang entered, followed by what looked like half the female population of Ridgemont High. They filed in silently, filling every available space in the large office. Their presence, a wordless statement of solidarity. What is this? Harrison sputtered. The sisterhood, Melody said calmly. 53 victims of harassment and assault at this school. 54 if you count Skylar. We're here to say that if you suspend her, you'll have to suspend all of us. We all have similar documentation. We're all prepared to go public. This is inappropriate, the superintendent began, but was drowned out by the sudden cacophony of phones chiming. Every girl in the room had received the same notification. Becca Williams, Tyler's ex-girlfriend, read aloud. Channel 7 News. Breaking. Dozens of female students at elite Ridgemont High allege years of covered-up harassment. Mayor Brennan's phone rang. She answered tersely, her face paling as she listened. What do you mean? Trending? A pause. #1 in the state? The lawyer was frantically scrolling through his tablet. The Times article just went live. They're calling it Me Too Comes to High School. This is a disaster. No, Skylar said quietly. This is accountability. The office door burst open again. This time, it was Tyler himself, flanked by 2 more lawyers and his father, Thomas Brennan, Sen, a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a bourbon commercial and into a nightmare. Dad, tell them. Tyler's carefully constructed image was crumbling, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild. Tell them how this bitch set me up. Language. Tyler, his father said coldly, though his glare at Skylar suggested he shared the sentiment. Harrison, I trust you're handling this situation appropriately. The Brennan family has been very generous to this institution. Are you threatening the principal? Skylar interrupted, holding up her phone. Because I'm recording this conversation, and I'm pretty sure the FBI takes educational grant fraud pretty seriously. Thomas Brennan's face went from red to purple. You little, choose your next words very carefully. Mr. Brennan, a new voice said from the doorway. A woman in a sharp suit entered, extending her hand to Skylar. Diane Chen. Aklu. I'll be representing Miss Whitmore and the other victims pro bono. This is a private meeting, Harrison started. Not anymore, Diane Chen said smoothly. Not when my client's civil rights are being violated. Now, shall we discuss the systematic failure of this institution to provide a safe learning environment? Or would you prefer to have that conversation in federal court? The room erupted in overlapping arguments. The Brennans' lawyers squared off against Diane Chen, while the superintendent tried to restore order and the mayor made increasingly frantic phone calls. Through it all, the sisterhood stood silent and immovable, a wall of solidarity that spoke louder than any shouting match. But Skylar noticed something else. Tyler had gone very quiet, his eyes darting between the exits like a trapped animal. She recognized that look. It was the same one he'd worn right before he'd cornered Emma Rodriguez, right before he'd vandalized Deshawn's car. It was the look of someone who'd lost control and was about to do something desperate to get it back. She caught Melody's eye and nodded toward Tyler. Understanding flashed between them, and Melody began subtly positioning girls between Tyler and the door. Enough! Superintendent Davies slammed his hand on the desk. Everyone out except the involved parties. This is getting us nowhere. We're all involved parties. Aisha Patel said firmly. Every girl he's harassed, threatened, or assaulted is an involved party. She's right, Diane Chen added. My clients stay. Tyler's composure finally snapped. This is bullshit. He shoved past two girls, making for the door. You're all lying, bitches. And I'll prove it. But Emma Rodriguez, the girl he'd shoved into a locker, stood directly in his path. No more running. Tyler, no more hiding behind daddy's money. Move. Tula snarl. Raising his hand, everything happened in slow motion. Tyler's hand swung toward Emma. Skylar moved on instinct, grabbing a heavy glass paperweight from Harrison's desk. But before either could connect, Lily Kimkiet, artistic Lily who'd quit cheerleading after Tyler's harassment, executed a perfect Aikido wrist throw she'd learned after the incident. Tyler hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of him. He lay there gasping, finally experiencing what it felt like to be powerless. Tyler! His mother rushed to him, but he shoved her away, scrambling to his feet with rage in his eyes. You're done, he hissed at Skylar. All of you, I'll make your lives hell. Tyler Brennan, Officer Martinez, the school resource officer who'd been conspicuously absent until now, stepped forward. You're under arrest for assault, battery, and making terroristic threats. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer cuffed him, Tyler's bravado finally cracked. Dad, do something. Thomas Brennan stood frozen, calculating. His son in handcuffs, his wife's political career imploding on social media, 54 witnesses to his son's attempted assault. The math was simple, and the outcome inevitable. Get him a lawyer, he told his wife coldly, a criminal one this time. Mayor Brennan looked between her husband and son, her political mask finally slipping to reveal something almost human underneath. Tom, he's our son. He's a liability, Thomas Brennan said flatly, and we're done enabling him. As Officer Martinez led Tyler out, the fight seemed to drain from everyone in the room. Principal Harrison slumped in his chair, looking every one of his 63 years. The superintendent rubbed his temples like he was calculating early retirement benefits. Even the lawyers seemed subdued, recognizing a losing battle when they saw one. So, Diane Chen said briskly, shall we discuss reforms? Or should I start drafting the federal lawsuit? What followed was 3 hours of negotiation that would reshape Ridgemont High, mandatory harassment training for all staff, an independent review board for all complaints, the resignation of 3 administrators who'd buried reports, and most importantly, a zero-tolerance policy with teeth on that wouldn't bend for donations or family names. By the time they emerged from the office, the sun was setting, painting the hallways in shades of gold and amber. The sisterhood had waited the entire time, doing homework in the hall, sharing snacks, turning what should have been a tense vigil into something almost like a celebration. So, Melody asked as they walked toward the parking lot, feel like you won? Skylar touched her butchered hair, thinking of everything that had transpired since that morning. I feel like we survived. Sometimes, that's the same thing. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but this time, she recognized the voice immediately. Miss Whitmore? Patricia Chen from the Times again? I'm outside your school with a camera crew. Would you be willing to do an on-camera interview? Skylar looked at her reflection in the glass door-shoppy hair. Tired eyes, but something fierce and unbroken in her expression. Give me 5 minutes. She turned to the gathered girls. Anyone want to be on the news? The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Outside, The parking lot looked like a media circus, news vans from 3 different stations, reporters interviewing parents, and in the middle of it all, Tyler being loaded into a police car while his mother tried desperately to shield him from the cameras. Skylar, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a Channel 7 microphone, rushed over. How does it feel to be the girl who brought down Ridgemont High's culture of silence? I didn't bring down anything, Skylar said carefully. Very aware of Diane Chen's approving nod, I just refused to be silent. We all did. She gestured to the girls around her. Change doesn't come from one person standing up. It comes from all of us standing together. But surely you must have known the risks. Another reporter pressed. The Brennan family is incredibly powerful. Power is only as strong as the silence that protects it, Skylar said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside. When we speak up, when we support each other, that power crumbles. The interviews went on for another hour, each girl sharing her story, the collective weight of their testimonies painting a picture no amount of money could whitewash. By the time the last news van pulled away, the parking lot was nearly empty except for a small group of girls and one unexpected visitor, Mrs. Brennano, longer Mayor Brennan. As she'd announced her withdrawal from the race during the interviews, approached slowly, her power suit wrinkled, her perfect makeup smeared. Miss Whitmore, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. The sisterhood tensed, but Skylar held up a hand. Go on. I knew, the former mayor said, her voice breaking. I knew what my son was becoming, and I chose to look away. I chose political ambition over basic human decency. And now, she gestured helplessly at the empty parking lot where her son had been arrested. Now I've lost everything anyway. You haven't lost everything, Skylar said after a long moment. You've lost your denial. Maybe that's where healing starts. Mrs. Brennan nodded, tears flowing freely now. I'm going to make sure Tyler gets help. Real help. Not just lawyers. And I'm going to testify about everything. The cover-ups, the bribes, all of it. She walked away before anyone could respond, her heels clicking a lonely rhythm on the asphalt. Think she means it? Emma asked. Doesn't matter, Skylar said. We don't need her to mean it. We've already won. They stood there in the gathering darkness. 54 girls who'd found their voices and used them to shatter a system that had protected predators for generations. Tomorrow, there would be more battle-angry parents, resistant teachers, students who saw them as traitors to the social order, but tonight, they were victorious. Hey, Lily said suddenly, what are you going to do about your hair? Skylar laughed, running her fingers through the uneven strands. You know what? I think I'll keep it short. It's kind of liberating. Very Joan of Arc. Becca agreed. If Joan of Arc had a Twitter account and a legal team, as they walked to their cars, Skylar's phone buzzed one last time. This message was from a number she recognized: her mother. Saw the news? Grandma would be so proud. Come home when you're ready. I'm making your favorite dinner. And I have something to show you. At home, Skylar found her mother waiting with a box of old photographs. Pictures of her grandmother at sit-ins, at marches, standing up to authority with the same fierce determination Skylar had shown today. She cut her hair too, her mother said, pointing to a photo of a young woman with a defiant pixie cut. Said long hair was just something for the opposition to grab onto. She'd have loved what you did today. Skylar picked up the photo, seeing her own eyes looking back at her from her grandmother's face. Think things will really change? Change is slow, her mother said, pulling her into a hug. But it starts with someone saying no more. Today, that someone was you. Later that night, Skylar said a hit disc, looking at the flood of emails, messages of support from girls at other schools, asking how to start their own sisterhoods, interview requests from national news outlets, a personal note from a senator promising congressional hearings on harassment in schools. But the message that made her smile was from Melody. Sisterhood meeting tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Bring coffee. We've got more schools to change. Skylar touched her short hair one more time, then opened a new document on her laptop. At the top, she typed, "A guide to speaking up, how we changed Ridgemont High." She had a feeling she'd be needing copies. The next morning, Skylar walked into Ridgemont High with her head high and her hair short, past trophy cases that would soon bear plaques honoring courage instead of just athletic prowess. through hallways where girls could walk without fear, into a chemistry lab where real reactions were finally taking place. Tyler's empty seat seemed to watch her accusingly, but she didn't flinch. Jake and Marcus were absent too, their families having quietly transferred them to private schools in other states. The power vacuum their absence created was already being filled not by new bullies, but by something unprecedented at Ridgemont High. Genuine community, attention. Students. Principal Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom, noticeably missing its usual pompous tone. This is a reminder that our first school-wide assembly on respect and consent will be held this Friday. Attendance is mandatory. Also, nominations for the new Student Safety Council are now open. Please see Miss Chang in room 203 for details. A ripple of satisfaction went through the class. Real change. With infrastructure and everything. Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Before we begin today's lesson on chemical reactions, I want to say something. He looked directly at Skylar. Sometimes the most important reactions aren't the ones in our textbooks. They're the ones that happen when someone has the courage to be a catalyst for change. Thank you, Miss Whitmore, for reminding us of that. The class broke into spontaneous applause. Skylar felt her cheeks burn, but she smiled. Her grandmother had always said that real change happened not in grand gestures, but in the small moments when people chose courage over comfort. Now, Mr. Rodriguez continued. Who can tell me about endothermic reactions? As hands shot up around the room, many from girls who'd previously been too intimidated to participate when Tyler was there, Skylar realized that the real transformation wasn't in the headlines or the arrests or even the policy changes. It was in this, a classroom where everyone felt safe to learn, to speak, to be themselves without fear. Her phone vibrated with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Thank you for giving me the courage to report my Tyler. A girl from Lincoln High. Then another. Starting a sisterhood at Jefferson Academy. Any advice? And another. My daughter came home crying happy tears. Said someone finally stood up to the boys who've been tormenting her. That someone was inspired by you. By lunch, Skylar had received over 200 similar messages. The Ridgemont Rebellion, as social media had dubbed it, was spreading faster than any chemistry reaction. Mr. Rodriguez could demonstrate. We need a website. Melody announced at their impromptu sisterhood lunch meeting, a resource hub, downloadable guides, template letters for administrators, a secure reporting system. I can build that, offered Priya Sharma, who'd been too shy to speak up before, but was now leading the tech committee. Give me 48 hours? We need legal resources too, Emma added, her own experience making her passionate about protecting others. Contact lists for pro bono lawyers. Know your rights guides. And testimonials? Lily suggested. Show other girls they're not alone. Skylar listened to them plan. Watched them transform from victims to activists. And felt something her grandmother must have felt. All those years ago. Electric charge of change in motion. Unstoppable once it began. Earth to Skylar. Aisha laughed. You're spacing out on us? Sorry. Skylar said, just thinking about how Tyler said this wasn't over. He was right. But not in the way he meant. Speaking of Tyler, Becca said, scrolling through her phone, county jail records show he was denied bail. Judge called him a flight risk and a danger to the community. A moment of silence fell over the table, not in sympathy for Tyler, but in recognition of how rare it was for someone like him to face real consequences. Good, Emma said finally. Maybe a few months in custody will teach him what it feels like to be powerless. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch and the beginning of afternoon classes. As they gathered their things, a freshman girl approached hesitantly. Are you Skylar Whitmore? She asked, clutching her books like a shield. I am. I just wanted to say thank you. And also, the girl pulled out a small envelope. My mom wanted me to give you this. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note for the Sisterhood Legal Fund. From one mother who's grateful someone finally protected our daughters. Janet Morrison. Morrison? Melody gasped. That's Jake's mom. The freshman nodded. She's divorcing his dad. Said she's done enabling toxic behavior. She's testifying at Tyler's trial too. The ripples kept spreading. By the end of the school day, the sisterhood had grown to over 100 members. The legal fund had received dozens of donations. 3 more administrators had submitted resignations. and Skylar had been invited to speak at a national education conference about student activism, but the moment that mattered most came as she was leaving school. A group of freshman boys, the kind who usually traveled in Tyler-esque pack, stopped her in the hallway. "We wanted to apologize," one of them said, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "We laughed at his jokes. We didn't stop him. We were part of the problem." "What are you going to do about it?" Skylar asked. Not unkindly. "We're starting a group too," another boy said. "Brothers for change. Learn how to be better. Call each other out. Make sure no one else becomes another Tyler." Skylar smiled. That's a good start. As she walked to her car, past the spot where her ponytail had been cut just 36 hours ago, Skylar felt the weight of everything that had happened. She was exhausted, exhilarated, and somehow both older and younger than she'd been that morning. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen from the Times again. "Miss Whitmore, I'm calling to let you know that your story is our most read article this year. We'd like to do a follow-up series. After the rebellion, Building Better Schools. Would you be interested in contributing?" "Yes," Skylar said without hesitation. "But not just me. The whole sisterhood. This story isn't about one girl with chopped hair. It's about all of us." "Even better," the reporter agreed. "Can we start next week?" As Skylar drove home, she caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. Her hair was growing already. New growth pushing past the jagged edges. She'd never wear it in that long ponytail again that belonged to a girl who thought staying quiet and documenting was enough. This new style, short and sharp and unapologetically bold, belonged to a girl who'd learned that sometimes you had to be the storm to clear the air. Her phone, set to silent during the drive, showed 57 new messages when she parked. More girls reaching out. More schools asking for help. More proof that change, once started, was impossible to stop. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges. The Brennan's lawyers would regroup. Some parents would push back against the changes. There would be those who preferred the old system, where money mattered more than justice. But tonight, Skylar Whitmore, the girl with the severed ponytail who'd brought down a dynasty of harassment, allowed herself one moment of pure satisfaction. She'd won. They'd won. And Ridgemont High would never be the same. In room 203, where the sisterhood would meet every morning at 7:30 a.m., someone had hung a banner. "Well-behaved women seldom make history." Beneath it, in smaller letters, someone else had added, "But women who stand together, they change the world." And in a high school in suburban America, where trophy cases were being updated to honor courage and authenticity instead of just athletic achievement, where hallways were becoming safe spaces instead of hunting grounds, where voices long silenced were finally being heard, that's exactly what they did. The Ridgemont High auditorium was packed beyond capacity for graduation day. Skylar Whitmore adjusted her valedictorian stole, running her fingers through hair that had grown into a stylish bobstill shorter than before. But entirely her choice now. "Nervous?" Melody asked, straightening her own salutatorian sash. "Terrified," Skylar admitted. "It's easier to face down bullies than give a speech to 2,000 people, including him." Emma nodded toward the section reserved for special guests, where Tyler Brennan sat in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, brought from county jail to receive his diploma under Garda compromise his lawyers had fought for and barely won. "He's not our problem anymore," Lily said firmly. She'd been accepted to RISD on a full scholarship, her portfolio strengthened by the powerful art series she'd created about surviving harassment. The ceremony began with Principal Harrison, who'd announced his retirement, effective immediately after graduation, introducing the Ridgemont Pioneers, the first recipients of the new Courage and Leadership Awards. All 54 original members of the sisterhood walked across the stage to thunderous applause. When it came time for Skylar's valedictorian speech, she looked out at the sea of faces: parents who'd initially resisted change but came to embrace it, teachers who'd found their voices, students who'd learned that courage was contagious. "6 months ago," she began, "someone told me I needed to learn my place. They were right, but not in the way they intended. I did learn my place. It's standing up for what's right. We all learned our places. They're standing together." She spoke about transformation, about how Ridgemont High had become a model for schools nationwide. The sisterhood movement had spread to over 300 schools across 40 states. Their website had logged 2 million visits. Their legal fund had helped dozens of girls pursue justice, but the most important change, Skylar continued, her eyes finding Tyler in his shackles, is that we learned silence is not safety. Silence is complicity. And we will never be silent again. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. After the ceremony, as families took photos and graduates hugged, Thomas Brennan Sr. approached Skylar. He looked older, grayer, humbled by the bankruptcy his legal bills had caused, and the federal investigation into his business practices that had followed. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly, and to thank you. My son is getting help, now real help. Maybe someday he'll be the man he should have been. Skylar nodded. Everyone deserves a chance to change. Mr. Brennan, even Tyler, but that change has to be earned, not bought. As the sun set on her high school career, Skylar stood with the sisterhood one last time in room 203. The walls were covered now with photos, letters from girls they'd helped, newspaper clippings from around the world. The banner still hung proudly. Well-behaved women seldom make history. So what's next? Priya asked. Harvard for you? Yale for Melody. RISD for Lily. The sisterhood goes to college, Skylar said with a grin. Imagine what we can do with an entire university system. They laughed. But it wasn't really a joke. Change, once started, didn't stop at graduation. It grew, evolved, spread like wildfire through dry brush. And somewhere in a county jail, a young man who'd once believed power was his birthright sat alone, finally learning what accountability meant. His unconscious state that day on the principal's office floor had been brief, but his unconsciousness about the pain he'd caused had lasted years. Now, finally, Tyler Brennan was awake. Whether he'd use that awakening for redemption remained to be seen, but that was his story to write. This one belonged to the girls who'd refused to be silenced, who'd turned severed hair into battle flags, who'd proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply say, no more,